pushing uphill.
Here we are. I think we are now live. Chairman Chandler, if you'd like to take us, that would be great.
All right, very good. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Kentucky State Board of Elections, the January 19th, 2021 meeting. Our first meeting of 2021 and our first meeting since certifying the election of last year. The first thing I'd like to do is welcome a brand new member that we have on the board. As you all remember, we said goodbye to George Russell last time. And while we will miss George, I believe that we've got a significant and a welcomed new addition in Jerry Johnson. I have known Jerry longer than either one of us would like to admit. And I can tell you that Jerry is well-versed in elections. He's seen quite a few. He lives in Louisville. I'm not sure where you live right now, Jerry, but he's a hill country fella, James. He's from up in your neck of the woods, and we always like to have more folks from the hill country. Anyway, Jerry, welcome to you, and I would like to invite you to say hello to everybody and tell them anything you might think they need to know.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the board members and staff. I'm very excited to be a member of this group. I've watched you from afar, particularly over this last year, and been extremely impressed with the work that you've done through a period of time that no one expected and hope we never see again. But as Ben says, I'm originally James from Harlan, so I've driven through your beautiful country many times, going through 421 and head across the mountain. So, but I presently live in Frankfort. I've been there for about 25 years. I work at the University of Louisville. I have worked at basically all levels of government, from local government through state government, and even done a little bit of work on the federal level. So it's an extreme pleasure to be here. I always hate to be the guy that follows a guy like George Russell, because all you do is follow, you don't take their place. So George and I have been friends for a long time. When I first came to Frankfort, he was executive director of the Board of Elections. So I also want to thank Jared and the staff for a very fine orientation meeting back a week or so ago. And that was very helpful for me. So just know I'm a strong team player. I'm here to help and provide any level of assistance I can. And if I get a little bit too far in one part of the driveway, then just push me back into the center. So that's, but I appreciate being a part of this group.
Well, good to have you, Jerry. And I know you're going to be a tremendously valuable member. We have had a good fortune in the last year or more with the membership of this board. We've got a group of people that really makes a point of trying to work together. And I couldn't be more proud of a group to work with. And I think the result has manifested itself in the election outcome that we had. Record turnout, very few problems. And while, as you all know, the rest of the nation is mired in controversy, here in Kentucky, we just roll right along. So hooray for all of you. We're lucky to have a board like this. I suppose I need to take the roll. I also want to mention we got some other good news in the interim, and that is our extremely valuable member, Deanna Brangers, has been reappointed to a new 4-year term. We're very pleased about that. And Deanna, would you like to say a thing or two?
I can. Deanna Brangers, member from Louisville, Kentucky, but originally from Campbellsville, Kentucky. Sometimes I don't give that a shout out often enough. So I might live in an urban area at the moment, but I certainly know the rural areas as well. And I'm just so proud of the work that this board has done over the last year. We have really worked together. There is just a camaraderie of, we have to make this work. We have to make it work for the citizens of Kentucky. And I think that's exactly what we did. It was evidence on election night. The secretary has worked with this board. The board has worked with this secretary. I think a lot of other states would love to have the cooperation going back and forth that we have had in Kentucky. So this is truly an honor for me to be able to serve on this board. And I'm just very, very happy to have another 4-year term to do that.
Well, thank you, Deanna. We're very, very glad you've got that term too. We, of course, are doing this meeting on Zoom because of the pandemic, which has caused caused everybody to alter their existences. And I am unfortunately on a telephone because my computer went down, so I can't see everybody on one screen. But I will try to go person by person and have each member identify themselves as I scroll through my screens. The first person I see is James Lewis. James?
Yeah, James Lewis, retired county clerk, Leicester County. I want to welcome Mr. Johnson to the board and congratulate Deanna on her reappointment. Thank you.
Great. Corey Skolnick.
Corey Skolnick, member, Jefferson County. Welcome to our newest member, Mr. Johnson, and congratulations to Deanna.
Lynn Lane.
Lynn Lane, member, retired clerk from Ballard County. Welcome, Jerry, and congratulations also, Deanna, on another 4-year term. Looking forward to working with all of you all again.
Dwight Sears.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Jerry. Congratulations, my friend Deanna. Dwight Sears, member, Pulaski County.
And we've got Sherry Whitehouse.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited about 2021. Welcome, Jerry. And of course, congrats to Deanna. Super proud to get to continue to serve with you. I'm looking forward to a great year. Bullitt County member. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we've got our esteemed Secretary of State, Mr. Michael Adams. And Mr. Secretary, I want to congratulate you especially because you've had a whale of a year in 2020. It's been rough on all of us, but in my estimation, you've come out of it very successfully and you've done a nice job.
Thank you so much. My goal for this year is to have no elections. Hold me to that.
Oh, we have to avoid specials, I suppose.
Yeah. There's a wet dry vote in Davis County next month, but other than that, I think we're free and clear.
Yeah, good.
Well, good morning, Michael Adams, Secretary of State, non-voting member. I want to congratulate and welcome Jerry Johnson. Jerry, I look forward to working with you and eventually meeting you in person someday while we're on this board. And Deanna, I'm so relieved that you're going to still be with us for the next 4 years. We couldn't do it without you.
Very good. Thank you, Michael. We also have a new president of the County Clerks Association with us today. We say goodbye to our esteemed clerk from Henderson County, and we welcome the new kid on the block from Montgomery County. Chris, would you like to say hello?
Good morning, everyone. It's glad to be a part of this association here and the group that we're dealing with. I see a lot of familiar faces, James and Lynn. It's always good to see fellow clerks and retirees that are still active and going. And we do miss you guys in our association. I just think Renee obviously has done a great job. So it's big shoes to fill for me following Renee. She went through a tough time, obviously, through the COVID pandemic, and we're still doing the remnants of that. But we are a little bit better equipped now. I think everybody's accustomed to Zoom. So just glad to be here today with you guys and looking forward to sharing a few thoughts and ideas later in the meeting. So.
Thank you very much, Chris. Welcome, and we're glad to have you. With that, well, I guess I better say hello to the members of the staff who are on the call and identify them. Karen Sellers, you're the first one I see. Karen is the Assistant Director of the State Board of Elections. We've also got our esteemed director, Mr. Jared Deering. We got Rachel Pointer, who is, we go to Rachel to talk about the money, always an important thing. Taylor Brown, our general counsel, is also with us. And we've got Tom Watson and Sheila Walker, I believe, also on the call. So hello to all of you. Our fine staff, I want to give you guys a shout out too, because of course we're just the board. You guys are the ones who do the work, and you did a great job last year, unlike any year that we hopefully will ever see again. All right. With that, I'd like to read and approve the November 2020 minutes. And since I know you all don't want me to read them, I'll accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
A motion by James Lewis. Do I have a second? Second by Lynn Lane.
I had one change.
Oh, who is that? Michael?
Secretary Adams. Yeah.
Yes.
Just real fast, the next to last paragraph on the first page quotes me saying, "We have a day of cure." I don't know what that was supposed to mean. We had this meeting 2 weeks after the election, so the cure process had already been completed. Could we just strike that line?
Sure. And I don't think anybody's got a problem with that, do they?
No.
All right, we will accept James' motion with that line struck, and Lynn's motion to, or her second. Do we have, well, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Minutes are approved. Let's move on to the ratification of County Board of Election replacements. That's pursuant to KRS 117.035. And it looks like we've got 4 counties to deal with: Wayne, Gallatin, Scott, and Jessamine. Jared, would you like to give us any info on this?
Yes, this is our standard process of which taking 5 names from the county chair. These will be ratifications for staff approval. And per historic reference, we take the name from the top of the list and appoint that way.
And that's what you've done in all 4 cases.
Correct.
Do we have a motion to, can we approve them all as a block?
Yes.
Do we have a motion?
I'll motion that we approve all of them as a block.
Was that you, Deanna?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I can't see everybody on the same screen, so bear with me.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Who was that?
Dwight.
Oh, okay, Dwight. Thank you. We have a motion by Deanna Brangers and a second by Dwight Sears. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good. Rachel Pointer, we move to you. Financial reports, November and December.
Good morning, everyone. On page 13 of your board book, that's going to be just a breakdown of our general fund expenses for November. So you will see a difference there. Everything looked a little strange this year, starting in July for the fiscal year due to the pandemic. So I think going forward, we're going to see a little bit more consistent numbers of what we truly spend overhead in elections in the upcoming months. I estimate that once you see the first quarter, that will be a truer reflection of what our general funds are going to be spent on post-pandemic election. So page 13 is our November expenses. We were transferring some expenses that were made originally out of general funds over to our coronavirus relief fund. So that's why you will see a credit there. We've had some ongoing storage conversations with COT. So they've been issuing us credits. So you're going to see those in this month's reflection. If you go to page 14, that will be December's totals. And these are going to be what I anticipate to see more consistently going forward. This is going to be a truer reflection of what we're actually spending without the financial stress of a pandemic election. So on page 15 is, bear with me just a moment, I'm having to rotate my screen. So on page 15 is the breakdown of the balance in our security grants. We have 3 as of right now. We have HAVA Title I that we still have a little bit left. We're just basically spending interest off of that grant right now. And once that's expended, we'll be completely done with the HAVA Title I grant. We have the second one is our 2018 election security grant. And the final grant on that page is the 2020 security grant. I will make a note here that the federal financial reports are due in December for each of these grants. We did turn those in. There was a change in process for the way that we turn those in before. Previously, we just did all of that by hand and by paper. So the Election Assistance Commission has decided that they migrated all of the states over and those grants over to a digital system. There were some hiccups during that process, but we did communicate with EAC along the way. They were in full knowledge of everything we were doing. So we got through those hiccups and everything was supported and everything is in compliance at this time. And hopefully they've worked those kinks out so that we shouldn't have any of that transition going forward. The page 16 in your board book is our original CARES grant from Election Assistance Commission. That is at a zero balance now for federal funding after we issued some funds to each county for additional staffing. That took all of our federal funds from that grant. We do still have a state match requirement of $227,917.45. We have worked with the Office of the State Budget Director to establish that those funds will be paid. We will split that state match requirement. We'll split that between this quarter and the next quarter, and that should be paid, all of our state match, by the end of FY21. So that is the goal. You will see that in the previous board book that you have from November, the state match total is slightly higher. That is because we did have some counties return their CARES grant funding because they did not utilize all of those funds. So they came out of general funds. So that's why there's an increase, because there's a credit back for those that they returned. The remaining pages, the next page is going to be our coronavirus relief fund totals. This is basically just a breakdown of what we have been spending, what we have been charging to our coronavirus relief fund. I have worked with OSBD, the Office of the State Budget Director, John Hicks, and we've done our reporting. I spoke to him on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and we do have our reporting current for that. I did include the January expenditures on here as of the date that I ran this report. January will not be finalized until January the 8th, so I highly anticipate that we'll have more transactions, but that's where we stood as of last week when these numbers were run. It looks like page 18 is just going to be a summary of all of the remaining balances that we have on our grants and what we're looking at there. I will also say that in January, we did issue the HAVA Title II money that the board approved to Fayette County for voting equipment. And so that charge will be incurred in January, and you will see it in the next board packet coming up. Page 19 is just a summary of all of our interest-bearing accounts for our grants. And those are balances on those. Anybody have any questions that I could help with? All righty. Thank you, guys.
Very good, Rachel. Thank you so much. Next item on our agenda is a report from our general counsel, Mr. Taylor Brown. Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, everybody. Wanted to hit on the next part. I'm unfortunately here to report there is a next part to the 2020 general election, but the report is that it's going smooth, so don't worry. As some of you may or may not know, that United States Election Assistance Commission requires that every 2 years we submit a report to them. It's known as the EVES report. EVES stands for Election Administration and Voting Survey. And basically it's just kind of a way for them to take a temperature across the country. It's Kentucky as well as the other 49 states in the union that are required to do this. It's their opportunity to take a temperature of what's going on throughout the country with the electoral process. We're kind of, well, myself, Executive Director Deering, Ms. Sellers, everyone I think is kind of making this one of our priorities this month. And well, let me back up and just, for those who may not know, the EVES report, the survey, it's a pretty healthy survey. It asks everything from, registration types, registration numbers, what kind of equipment counties are using, poll workers, what are the ages of the poll workers you use in those counties. So some of those questions are things that we can answer easily at SBE. And then some of them we thought, maybe that's more for the counties to answer. So we've split up the survey about half and half and given the counties their half to do, and then we're working on the other half. And as of this morning, Karen can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe this is accurate. Of the 120 counties, we've got all but 6 that have already completed everything. And this is a first draft is due at the end of the month to the election to the EAC. So we're ahead of the game there. The 6 that we don't have, some of them are running into some COVID issues and stuff like that, which is unfortunately still to be expected. So we're not really running into any problems there. So we're good there. And I just, like to say thank you to Karen, Jared, Keith Miller for helping out with that, and all the clerks. All the clerks have been really good. I know everyone's super busy, but no one's really given us any grief or anything like that. They've been great about getting this done. Coming back from the holidays, here we are asking them to do this big survey, and everybody's been great. So a thank you to the clerks for that. As to our part of it, we should get that completed in the next week or two. And we've got Tom. I know Tom's on the call. Tom and his team, Jared and Joe and Mark, they're working on that, and we fully expect to have that completed before the deadline. And again, I look for Kentucky to be a leader among the 50 states in this regard. So just kind of an update on that. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has about the EVES report. I know some of y'all might not have known about that, the newer members, and then the older members have probably seen this a time or two, but just wanted to kind of give everybody an update on that and ask if anybody had any questions about it.
Anybody? All right. Taylor, you've done it. Oh, did somebody have one? No. Well, Taylor, you've done a good job. No questions means that everybody's in good order. So very good. We will, I guess, hear another update next meeting. With that, we will move to the Assistant Director, Karen Sellers. Karen, you have some things to report to us as well.
Good morning. With the exception of Mr. Johnson and maybe, well, Mr. Cockrell knows about it, we had sent out 3.4 million how to vote postcards prior to the primary. And I know the board has heard about our bins and the sorting process, and I just wanted to provide a little bit of an update on that. So we are down to 287 total bins, and that includes 77 bins that we are still sorting. We're sorting them into 3 categories: non-deliverable, Kentucky forwarding addresses and out of state. You know, they were returned to us with an out of state. That is that's something over 200,000 cards.
Karen, just to clarify, what you're talking about is the effort to clean up the voter rolls, right?
Right. We sent that out. I think they went out in May.
Right.
And it was
this is for the general public. This is about cleaning up the voter rolls, and we want to make sure by going through this process that we have accurate and eligible voters on the voter rolls, and hopefully get as many people off of the rolls who are not eligible.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, just to give a little bit of clarity to that process. So this actually, the cards that Karen is talking about right now are actually part of the emergency regulation that was passed for the primary election, where we notified all voters of the changes in the election. But like everything that we did, it was a bipartisan effort that both added enfranchisement tools, but also added security and transparency to the system. Part of that emergency regulation was that every card that we sent out, we would use as a uniform mailer, so that if it was sent back to us, it would generate a return mail date, and that we would use that, like you were saying, as part of our list maintenance program. And this should be highly effective because it is based solely on whether or not someone still resides at the address of which they are registered. And just to be clear, and we'll go over a little bit more of this in my report for list maintenance practices, but none of these individuals are being removed from the system. What's happening is a return mail date will be generated. That will then send out what we call an 8D2 mailer. That will then allow us to make them inactive in the system, or as we are now required to call them, an asterisk voter. And that will give them 2 federal election cycles before they're removed per NVRA and federal law. Sorry, Karen.
Thank you for that, Jared. And what it means basically is we're trying to make sure that every single person on the roll who may be questionable or who hasn't participated in a couple of elections previously has the ability to participate again. We want to make sure that everybody is included if possible. At the same time, on the other end, we don't want people who are not eligible included. So that's the process. And Karen, thank you for allowing that interlude. Please carry on.
Well, thank you, Jared. That was a good segue into making sure that, you know, everyone understands that our focus is to get these cards divided. We've brought on 2 full-time temporary staff to help us with that process, although most of us in the office have also separated cards at one time or another during the last several months. But we believe that probably, I would say by February, we've purchased 3 new scanners that will allow us to get these cards into the voter registration system. And as Jared said, they'll be dated, you know, put on there so we can document that these cards were either returned, Kentucky forwarded addresses, or these voters are now residing out of the state. So we're looking forward to getting some cleanup from these 287 bins that have been in our office for quite a while. So the other piece that we're working on is there was also another letter that was sent that from Secretary Adams shortly after the cards went out. And again, this was to voters, inactive voters. It was 162,000 pieces mailed, letters mailed, and we have 760 letters that were returned with a signature to remove them from the rolls. We have approximately 88,000 that were returned, undeliverable, which is about 153 trays, mailing trays. So we're hoping to try to get that process completed, as well as the how to vote postcard that, to try to move forward with the list maintenance.
Thank
And
you,
that
Karen.
concludes.
Anybody have any questions about this process or anything that Karen reported?
Yeah, could I ask a question, please?
Who is that?
Secretary Adams.
Ah, yes. Okay, Mr. Secretary. Sorry, I can't see you, so
No
please
worries.
bear with me.
No worries. Well, I have a question, but first I want to make a point to kind of flesh out what you were saying, Chairman Chandler, and what Jared was saying. This is something that we have needed to do for a while. It's something that we essentially are under a federal court order to do to get our roles in compliance with both federal and state law. This is not a game of gotcha where we're trying to throw people off the rolls who want to vote. This is a necessary process provided for by longstanding federal and state laws that we bend over backwards to make sure any person who's eligible to vote is registered and gets to vote, but that we also engage in maintenance to make sure that people who aren't eligible don't get to vote in our elections. That's appropriate. And Governor Beshear agrees with that. That's why he and I, through a compromise, included this in our plan for 2020. So that's just a little bit more context. My question for Karen is there another wave of letters with my signature going out to remaining folks identified on this list? I think you'd said 162,000 letters have gone out. Obviously, we've got more postcards back than that number. So is there another wave soon anticipated of those letters to go out?
So under when this was originally put forward, the request was that anyone who was made asterisk inactive, or what we call an asterisk voter at that time, would receive a letter that was drafted by your office and that was sent out by SBE. At that time, there were 162,000 voters. Every single one of those voters received a letter. And I think, like Karen said, we've had roughly about 700 of those have been returned. So unless there's another round of funding right now, that's not the case. I know that there is some discussion about legislation of putting that forward, moving in the future. But as of right now, it'll just be the 162,000 per the emergency regulation.
Thank you. And just one more point of clarification for folks who are watching. The letter that we're talking about, federal and state law prohibit us from taking someone off the rolls just because they don't live in our state anymore and they have registered to vote in another state even though they've done that, that doesn't automatically delist them from our rolls. The only way that we can take someone off the rolls who is alive and who has not been judged guilty of a felony or judged mentally incompetent, a person who is alive and doesn't meet one of those criteria, even if that person has moved to some other state, we cannot take that person off of our rolls by law without written consent, unless we wait through 2 federal general election cycles. So we'll certainly, after those 2 cycles are over, take folks off the rolls who qualify, who haven't voted in that period of time, haven't updated their information in that period of time. But the only way to move faster than that and get people off the rolls who don't live here anymore is to find them and get their written permission. And that's what this project has done.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for that lucid clarification. It was, I think, very much needed because obviously we've had some controversy in this country about who is able to vote legally and who's voting illegally. And it's important. I don't think you can reaffirm it enough that we're trying very hard to encourage and allow everybody who has the legal right to vote in this state to have that opportunity. At the same time, we want to make sure that we don't allow people who are ineligible to vote to vote. That includes, of course, people who have passed away, and it includes people who no longer live in Kentucky, among others. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comment on this subject?
Let me, if I could,
yes, Member Johnson.
Just a quick clarification. So understand, I was given a really good overview of this process by Jared and his staff, and I got to witness firsthand all the different boxes of returned mail that came back into the office. So they've got a yeoman's job to do to get through all this. The only question I have is, if someone who hasn't voted but does in fact live at the proper address with no other reason known to disqualify them is simply not voting enough to put them on that asterisk list?
No, they would have to. So there's a multi-step process that is, it takes part of making someone, nationally, the nomenclature is inactive, but in Kentucky, we're required to say asterisk voter. The process there would be is if someone has not voted for 2 federal election cycles, we go back into the system, we look to see if there's any contact with that voter in any way, whether they updated their voter registration information, contacted us through the circuit clerk's office, through their county clerk's office, or if they voted. And if they have not, then we will send them a postcard. If that postcard is then initially, this was part of, so there's a 2-step process here. One is when we first started this process after the consent decree was first formed, that generated what we called a uniform list mailer. We sent them that first postcard. If it was mailed back to us, we then sent them an 8D2 mailer. Only then was that person made inactive. If that person fails to touch the system in any way over the next 2 federal election cycles or 4 years, then they'll be removed. However, moving forward per NVRA, as someone has no touches in the system, so they have not voted for 4 years, they haven't updated their information, they haven't contacted us, the circuit clerk or the county clerk's office, or they haven't voted, then we will just mail them an 8D2 mailer that informs them they need to update their information or contact us in any way. Otherwise, in 2 federal election cycles further, so another 4 years past that, they'll be removed per NVRA.
So I think I'm understanding that touching the system can be a number of things. It can be confirming with the clerk that you still live where you're supposed to and that you're an eligible voter. Even if you choose not to vote, that in and of itself is enough to keep you on the roll.
No, and for the most part, I would say is as individuals, if they did not move, a lot of those individuals that received the 8D2 mailer, that card in itself is one of the safety nets we use for voters. It informs them how to update their information, how to contact us. It also encourages them to vote, right? So they ultimately, that's what we want. If someone is an eligible voter, we want them voting. The best process we have for taking someone off of the asterisk list is by voter credit and voter history. And during the presidential election cycle, obviously voter turnout was extremely high for the state. That will predominantly remove a lot of the people that were on that original asterisk list, but there will still be appropriate list maintenance where someone has either moved out of the state, moved to a different county, moved within the county, but to a different address. All of those individuals can be updated in the system and not removed. But ultimately, if someone doesn't vote for 2 federal election cycles for 4 years, they'll receive a notification, and then they'll have 2 more federal election cycles after that to touch the system in any way. So like I said, either voting, contacting the Board of Registration directly through our website, the county clerk's office, circuit clerk's office, in any way that will remove them from that asterisk list.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Good question, Jerry. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Moving on, we come to Mr. Tom Watson. Tom, are you with us?
Yes, if I could real quick, Tom, just kind of give a brief primer of what Tom's going to be giving a report on. I thought as we move out of the general election cycle for the presidential, it's good for the board to kind of understand the processes that are kind of taking place. One of the major processes, obviously, the postcards that Karen spoke about, the ease report that Taylor gave a briefing on. I brought Tom in today to talk about ERIC. ERIC is an acronym for Electronic Registration Information Center. It is a multi-state partnership between 30 states and the Commonwealth, or 29 other states and the Commonwealth. It allows us to trade information with those states in an appropriate way. And much like our election plan that we had for the general and primary election, it is a compromise of values. It is both an enfranchisement tool as well as a list maintenance practice. It allows the states to send out a mailer to all eligible but unregistered voters. It encourages voters to register to vote, to participate in the system. But then it's also a process that allows us to communicate with other states that as they transfer from one state to another, we will be notified, and that will be part of our list maintenance practices as it's ongoing. I've asked Tom to step in and kind of give a little primer of where we're at with that and where we stand. With that, Tom? Oh, Tom, looks like we lost him.
Yeah. So the Eric is primarily a list maintenance tool. Well, in fact, you could say that's really what it's all about. And it works, as Jared said, both on the removal side and on the empowering side. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of things. Let me share my screen real quickly. Oh, it's been disabled. If you're
Tom, we're hearing a lot of static.
Are you breaking up, or is it just on my side?
Hearing a lot of static.
Okay.
Tom, you might be breaking up.
Sounded like
Hang on a second.
Sorry, hazards of working during a pandemic. Tom is working remotely from the house, so my apologies. Tom, will see if we can't get Tom back up, and if not, I can jump in.
That's all right. Can you hear me now? Is this
Yes.
better? Okay. I think it was a bandwidth issue. I live out in the country, and I've got good bandwidth occasionally. Okay. So we won't worry about the screen share or the video. I think that's probably going to help you hear me. So basically, Eric is very complicated. It's very technically challenging. I want to do a shout out to Mark for his work, as was previously stated with Eves and some of those things, some of the reports that take so much time for SBE, and Joe, one of our new programmers who's been working on Eric, and he's done a fantastic job. Briefly, Eric requires us to send all of our data, all of our voter data, and it's totally anonymized and encrypted. It's double blind, so there's no risk there of any personal information getting out. And we also work with transportation, Kentucky Transportation. They send us all of their data from the DMV, and we massage that data into one huge report and send it to Eric. They then merge that with the other 29 states, and that's where they derive all this information, okay? So they provide 4 basic list maintenance reports. An in-state updates report, and that just means that they've identified people, voters, using our data and DMV who they believe have moved in-state. So we can contact those people and see if they need to update. Then there's an in-state duplicates report, and that indicates a match between 2 voter records. So that occurs in every state occasionally. People give wrong information the first time, then they come in, register again, and they give different information, and it ends up creating 2. So they look for duplicates. Then there's the cross-state updates report, and that is where they take our information and merge it with the other states, especially the border states. Well, all of them, but we get most of ours from the border states. And they will let us know if they believe that a voter has moved out of Kentucky and is now registered in a different state, at which point we can contact them and begin the process of getting them removed. They also provide a deceased report, and they use the Social Security Death Master List for that. So those are the 4 list maintenance reports. I'll return to that in a second. The 5th is the eligible but unregistered. And that is where they go through the DMV records and they look to see if that person should be eligible but is not registered. They try to eliminate non-citizens, all of that. So it's very, hopefully clean. They do make mistakes, we've found, but who doesn't? But it's not 100%. So we have to vet the report quite a bit. So it takes a lot of work, but it's worth it. To bring you up to speed on where we are, we started this process 6-7 months ago at the worst possible time during the election cycle and the pandemic. But we've managed to pull it off and meet their requirements ahead of time, to get our membership in place and to start the process. So we already have a deceased report, an initial one. We've got about 8,300. Now, of course, we don't just remove those people. We are double checking them, and then they'll be removed from the rolls. We have about 5,000 in-state duplicates. And again, we've got to check those with the counties and make sure that they actually are different voters. So those two are in motion. I just, at the end of December, received, that's what I was going to show you, our reports, the list maintenance reports, and what we're doing moving forward. So that's what we're working on now, is figuring out how often can we do this? How often does it make sense? How often does Eric recommend that? Basically, it's once a year. Potentially, if needed, we could maybe accelerate that, but that's what we're working on. So we've already got these underway. We also send that report that I was telling you about, all of the voters and the DMV. We send that every 2 months. We're working with DMV to see if we can move that to a monthly, but we don't have an answer on that yet. So things are going very well. We've got everything going. We're working on the ongoing processes. Very quick rollout, but it's looking good.
Tom, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for Tom? As you all can see, and as anybody watching this can see, making sure that our voter rolls are maintained properly is an extremely involved, complicated, and labor-intensive process. And we appreciate all the efforts. It shouldn't surprise anybody if from time to time mistakes are made and some people fall through the cracks, because you're talking about trying to do this on a statewide basis with a state with almost 4.5 million residents. It's a job, a big job. And we appreciate you all trying to undertake it and to do it properly.
Thank you.
With that, yes, sir. With that, we move on to Chris with the County Clerks Association. You're up. And you're muted.
There we go. All right. Just give you a little update on what we're doing. Obviously, with the anticipation after the success of the election in 2020, and then also looking at other states for preparation, our KCCA has formed a legislative task force specifically to focus on election legislation that's coming down the pipe. So we've got a task force together. We're getting some kind of feedback. We've already worked with some of our legislators. We worked with Secretary of State already. And I know that there will be bills introduced. And it's our goal as the association to be there and help legislators and the Secretary of State, State Board of Election, you guys to help craft something that is going to be beneficial for every county. And then with that being said, you know, the heart behind our association from day one is to have legislation that's going to be what we call the 2 F's, funding and flexibility. Every county has its constraints, and it, you know, whether it's geographical, whether it's financial, and we want to see legislation that's going to further our state. Obviously, I'm sure that's the heart behind your all's thinking on this also, is that we want to see what's good in the past continue, and then tweak the things that weren't quite tailor-made for each county. So we're working with our legislators right now. We look forward to working with you guys, and we're just available. We do have a meeting with Brenner tomorrow, and well, I think we're going to kind of do some work on that. So is there any questions from you guys for us?
Anybody have any questions for Chris? Well, Chris, I'd first of all just like to comment that you really can't say enough about the job that the county clerks did in the last election under circumstances, as we all know, that were unprecedented. You all had never seen anything like it before. None of us have. And to pull this thing off in 122 different counties, in some cases very different, was just a remarkable piece of work. And I just think that anybody who knows anything about it is incredibly impressed. I think a lot of people don't understand, given all of the stuff that's gone on on television and on the internet and so forth, just how elections are run. There are no federal elections in the sense that the federal government does not run an election. Anybody who's elected to a federal office is elected as a result of an election that's run by, in Kentucky's case, county clerks. We also don't run the election on the ground at the state level. We have 120 individual elections that are run in this state, and you guys are running them, and they are aggregated at the state level, and the votes are counted. But it's up to you guys to run them, and each one of them is separate, which adds to, frankly, the security of the elections. I think it's an ingenious system that's been set up, and a very diverse system. And it's important, I think, for the public to understand that in terms of their acceptance of the election results, that these are, these are 120 separate elections, which makes it very, very difficult to effectively steal an election, certainly on a large scale. But what you guys have carried out as county clerks in this state in this last year, in my opinion, is nothing short of remarkable. So thank you very much for the hard work that you guys have done.
Well, Chairman, I'll just echo that and just say that it does take a key component to this is just working together with federal, state, and county levels. And I think that's what's been so beneficial here in our state is that we've had, I liken it to a construction. You've got site preparation, then you have a general contractor, and then you have the detailed work. And with the county clerks being the detailed work on the level that we're at. But without being able to work together with you all, with the state, with the federal, it doesn't come together as well as it has. And so we just want to continue to go forward with the good things that we've seen and build on what we've established here in Kentucky. So thank you all for your help with the county clerks.
Well, you're most welcome. And again, it's just an incredibly strong job that you all have done. And I have to say, we've got Republicans and Democrats in the county clerk's office and have such a small level of partisanship. It really has been a bipartisan effort, and it's just very admirable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. If there's nothing else for Chris, we'll move on to Secretary Adams. Ms. Secretary?
Well, thank you. I want to take what Chris was talking about and extend that a little further. Chris has been a really great partner. He and his task force and coming up with suggestions, lobbying legislators. We've kind of been quiet the last couple of months on the election reform legislation stuff. That doesn't mean that we're not working it. We're working it inside by talking with legislators of both parties. We haven't done any sort of media events around it yet, but the idea is hopefully to have a bill actually written and available for review by the public and everyone else in the next couple of weeks. Toward that end, as Chris noted, we've got a meeting with several legislators tomorrow that are kind of the core team of folks putting together a package. It's a pretty significant package. If it stays in the condition that I expected it will. It encompasses the big four things that I think that we need to continue from what we did previously last year. Keeping the absentee ballot request portal, keeping a signature cure process, allowing for vote centers, and having at least a few days, maybe even a week, but at least a few days of in-person early voting. If you all remember at our last meeting in November, I offered you survey results from the county clerks. By landslide margins, the county clerks support all four of these principles. It's true of urban and rural clerks. It's true of Democrat and Republican clerks. There's really I think a consensus across the state that this worked, and we should try to keep it. The biggest factor working against that sort of reform in this session is just time. There's some big stuff going on that, of course, they've got to be attentive to in the legislature. They've got to pass a budget. They've got to pass, or they believe they've got to pass some sort of COVID-related legislation, potentially some justice reform. There's some big ticket stuff that's very time sensitive and urgent. And the election stuff is a little less so, simply because we have no elections this year. But I still think there's a pretty good chance of getting this passed in this session. And at the worst, at least it continues the conversation from last year, and that helps us get a bill hopefully in 2022. So I'm still pretty bullish on this actually happening. There are a few more things that I think will be in here. I do think, practically speaking, the best way to get it done is to have some stuff that pulls in votes from different parts of the political spectrum. And the best way, I think, to get some additional votes from the Republican side is to have some things that further enhance ballot integrity. We didn't have the problems in our state that some suspected elsewhere, but we can always improve our laws. One thing is to codify what we've already done by regulation. You all have done by regulation as policy, which is to set a standard that we won't certify an election machine that's not capable of processing a paper ballot, allowing for a paper trail. When I got here a year ago, we had 29 counties that had no paper balloting capacity, no paper trail capacity. Now, all 120 counties have that capacity, but some of them have a mix of electronic machines and paper ballot machines. And I like this to have a standard of not an unfunded mandate for right now, but a standard that is these counties upgrade their equipment, they'll go to a better form of machine, a paper ballot machine. That's the one issue I found in 3 years, between 2 years of campaigning and 1 year in office, that everybody I've ever met agrees with that sort of approach. Something else is to enhance the post-election audit capabilities of the Attorney General. Right now, the Attorney General can only do 6 audits, and they have to be randomized. So we've actually deferred to the Attorney General on what that language will look like. So there will be some other things in the bill. I suspect, I don't think anything will be controversial. I think it's all kind of common sense stuff that'll have support from across the spectrum, but I believe that will help capture the votes of maybe some Republicans that are somewhat neutral about everything else, but need something in that bill as a sweetener. So again, I'm still pretty optimistic that we can get this done.
Mr. Secretary, one thing that I would advise in terms of trying to get more Republican votes for this bill is point out how well they did in the election. It was a very strong showing by Republicans in this election. So I can't understand why there'd be any hesitancy on their part, because I just assume that they're interested in winning elections. I don't know why I think that, but I do. And they won the elections handily under this system. And I'm sure you're pointing that out to them.
Well, here's a point I like to make to really anybody. When I was on the ballot in 2019, we had, of course, the old-fashioned system we've had for 200 years of 98% of voters voting on one day. And the Republican candidates for treasurer, for auditor, for attorney general, for agriculture commissioner, they all got 58% of the vote. And then in 2020, Senator McConnell was up, much different turnout model, much different election model. He got 58% of the vote. He got the same proportion of votes with a higher turnout that we had with a different model the year prior. We had 42% turnout in 2019. We had, I think it was 64% turnout we've just calculated in 2020. My point is this: making it easier for people to vote doesn't help Democrats. It doesn't help Republicans. It just helps voters. The elections are going to come out the way they're going to come out. The question is, how hard do you make this on people to go vote? Our surrounding states have adopted some or all of these reforms, and they've gotten more Republican than we are. That's not a reason to do this, but it does prove the point that you're not going to give an artificial advantage, I don't think, to either party by making it easier for people to vote.
Well said. Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Executive Director, do you have anything you want to share with us?
Yeah, a couple things if I could. One, I'd like to thank the staff for putting that together for us today. I just want to make sure the board has a good idea of where we're at. Obviously, after a general election, it's important for us to concentrate on some of these administrative tasks. And that's part of our plan this year. Is not only are we going to be working on kind of reconfiguring a lot of our IT side, so including updating our voter registration system, looking at our web-facing portals. We're also going to be looking at some of our administrative tasks and making sure that we're on task with that. And part of that process is going to be list maintenance. As the board knows, we are under a federal consent decree. But more than that, we just want to make sure we have an effective and appropriate process that is doing everything that it can to make sure that we have clean voter rolls. But in doing so, we're doing it in a way that is guaranteeing that voters have access to the ballot in an appropriate way. List maintenance can be a truly effective way of enfranchising voters as well. It also makes sure that voters are notified when they do move, that they have the ability to update their information in the system and be able to receive the correct ballot face. It acknowledges to the voter where they vote on a regular basis, right? So all of these steps play a larger role of making sure that our voters know where they stand inside the system and have access to the ballot. And when a voter does move out of the state or passes away, that they are appropriately removed from the system in a way that conforms to both state and federal law. A couple of things that I wanted to touch on. One was similar to what Secretary Adams was mentioning, that there is a meeting tomorrow that will be discussing some issues for upcoming legislation. I think there are a couple of legislators that have reached out to the board asking for just general parameters of policy. We are not necessarily advocating for anything necessarily, but more of giving the voter, the legislature opportunity to ask questions of how these things kind of work. I know they're also working closely with the Secretary and KCCA. There is one thing that I would like to notify the board and give anyone any opportunity to give pushback on or give me any direction on. But there is one thing that I think the board should be asking for in the legislature. It is a more of a technical change. It is anything. It pertains to KRS 117.379. It is the statute that governs how we certify our election equipment. Currently, the statute reads that the all election equipment that is certified in the state of the Commonwealth will be also certified by the FEC. This law was written sometime either in the early 80s or early 90s, back when the EAC had not yet been formalized and created. The United States Elections Assistance Commission is now the federal organization that certifies election equipment. They have a really thorough process that they utilize, and we use that as our baseline in Kentucky, so that if a voting system is to be certified in the state, it has to first meet that base level of testing at the federal level, and then we have additional certification and testing that we do at the state level on top of that. So it has to meet that first set. Now, by historical standards, we just use the EAC certification, but in statute it says FEC. So that's one of the things that we'd like the legislature to change is instead of saying the FEC, it would say the United States Elections Assistance Commission. It also stipulates that the current cost for certification is $500. Again, that cost was set sometime in the mid 80s. So I have sent out a survey to my peers in other states asking what they are currently charging. We'll be talking with our vendors as well and some of our other partners to kind of determine what an appropriate cost should be, that so that it covers our costs at least. Right now, it does not. And so that's one of the things that we'll be discussing. I'm excited to tell the board that one of the individuals we'll be working with, that if the board is okay with this, that we'll be asking Representative Branscombe, our former chair, to help carry this bill for us. Like I said, it's technical in nature. I don't think there's anything partisan about that, and ultimately will help the board and the staff be able to make sure that election systems that we're certifying are certified in an appropriate manner. The other bit of notification I have about certification is for years now, we have relied on COT. There are in the certification process for Kentucky, there currently are 3 individuals that we are required to utilize. One is a security or IT expert. The other is a legal expert. The other is a county clerk. Currently, there are 2 county clerks and an individual from COT that fill that role. One of the other things that we're going to do on the legislation is ask that a member of the State Board of Election staff also be added to that certification list. So that way there's someone on the board that will help be able to certify that, so that when ultimately these certifications come to the larger board, that they have the ability to be able to share with you what that process was and exactly what that information is that you'll need to be able to move that forward. However, that being said, there is that one security IT professional that we utilize on the certification team. His name is Krishna Maparaju. He has been working with COT for years now. Unfortunately, Krishna has left to take on a new role in another position, and unfortunately will not be able to serve that. So we are working with David Carter at COT. He's the Commonwealth's Chief Information Security Officer. He's working with some members of his team to see if we can't begin to bring someone else in off of the COT team to be able to help us with that process, and then we'll move forward with that. I'll give the board an update as we get closer to that process. But hopefully we'll have that up and running in the next couple of weeks or so, because we do have a couple of vendor systems that are being requested for certification. And so we'll bring that back to you as we get closer. Are any questions about legislation or that process from anyone?
Hey, Jared, can I ask an unrelated question?
Yes, sir.
Actually, make an unrelated point. To your earlier point about the board and funding issues and so forth. Obviously, I understand you all run your own channels on that, but I'm happy to be an advocate too. If you all have specific needs on IT, on maintenance, on anything, give me dollar amounts and let me also do my own independent lobbying on your behalf. Sure. If I can. If you can get me something in the next 24 hours, that would be great before we go into these meetings tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping, like I said, I sent out a survey late last week. So NASED, National Association of State Elections Directors, they're a great resource for us, for the board. Not only their executive director, Amy Cohen, who does a great job for us in helping to give us information from the federal level and kind of what's going on nationally. But she's also a great hub that we can, if we have questions internally, we can send those out to our peers. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel all the time, so we can just kind of ask what our colleagues are doing in other states and how that's working. And she does a great job for that. So I'll go through that survey later this afternoon and get you both language that we're looking at, as well as some maybe some potential numbers that we can discuss before tomorrow's meeting. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that part of being an ERIC is both part of the federal consent decree, but it's also just good practices. There are now 30 states that are members of ERIC, and I'm excited to let the board know that those states now include Texas, Florida, and Ohio. I think we'll have a lot of state migration back and forth between these states, obviously the other states as well. We're hoping to see on ERIC membership that membership will also be growing over the next year. So hopefully more states will be coming on board to that. But I think it's a good note to know that both Florida and Ohio, specifically, those 2 states are members of ERIC, and that helps us be able to kind of identify those cross-state movers in a more effective way.
Very good. Anybody have any questions? All right. Thank you so much, Jared. now we move on to other business. We're almost to the end. Anybody have anything else they want to bring up that they haven't so far? All right, it's time to confirm our next meeting date. Jared, what date do we have on tap?
Well, we can do one of two things. One is the next meeting that would generate a meeting date. And Sheila, let me know if I'm off on this, but February 16th, 10 o'clock would be the regular date, third Tuesday of the month. But seeing as that, again, this is an off cycle year. I know there's the wet dry vote in Davies County that should be coming up, but if the board chooses to skip a month, I don't know if the board is interested in that, but I would be open to that discussion if the board would like to. Otherwise, I would recommend February 16th.
February 16th suits me. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Do you all want to skip a meeting, or should we get together? I kind of lean toward, even if we don't have an enormous amount of business, just reconvening, just to check in.
Works for me, Mr. Chairman, and I would agree.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I would agree with that, Ben.
Okay, very good. Then February 16th it is at 10 a.m. Now it's time for us to move into executive session. Executive session is authorized pursuant to KRS 61.810, parent 1, paragraph C for pending litigation, and paragraph M for security. So with that, we will move into executive session. That will not be a public part of the meeting, but we will log back on to adjourn after our executive session.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we move into executive session.
We
I
have now that was
Jerry.
Deanna who moved, and was it Jerry who seconded?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you all. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Very good. We'll